Hello beautiful people, welcome to Remi's Fashion. My name is Remi. In today's tutorial, I'm going to show you how to draft and sew a wrap top. I want to use this opportunity to say a big thank you to all Remi's Fashion subscribers. We do not take you for granted. Thank you so much for encouraging me to keep going, for engaging with the videos, for commenting, for sharing, for liking. I want to say a big thank you. I would not be where I am today without you guys. Thank you so much. And for those that have not subscribed, please subscribe. So let's get started. So today we're going to be drafting and cutting a wrap top. I love wrap tops so much. Anything that is easy, I love, because it's so easy to make it and you can make as many as you want. So I'm going to be using this Ankara fabric for cutting and sewing, and then I have my pattern paper and other sewing and drafting supplies. So I'm going to start with the drafting. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to be drafting out the back first. So I'm going to draw out my starting point. I always like to have a starting point. I'm going to draft out this pattern because I really like wrap tops, so that anytime I want to make a wrap top, I do not have to draft it all over again on fabric. So I can just take this pattern and use it to cut on my fabric. So this is going to be my starting point and this is going to be my shoulder line. I don't want it to be really cropped. So I'm going to measure out my vertical measurements. So from my shoulder to my bust is 12 inches. I'll mark. From my shoulder to my waist is 19 inches. I'll mark. And this is my 19 inches. And then I'll draw out horizontal lines. So I'll label. So this is my shoulder line, this is my bust line, and my waistline. So the next thing I'm going to do is to plot in my shoulder measurement on my shoulder line. My shoulder measurement is 18 inches. By the time I divide that by 2, it's going to give me 9 inches. So I'm going to measure 9 inches on my shoulder line. So 9 inches puts me here, I'll mark. And then I'm going to drop it by 1 inch because our shoulders are not straight. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is to draft out my neck width and neck depth. I'm going to be using a neck width of 4 inches and a neck depth of 1.5 inch. And then I'll just connect. So after doing this, the next thing I'm going to do is this 1 inch I drop my shoulder by, I'm going to connect it to the neck width. So the next thing I'm going to do now is I'm going to draw out my armhole line. And then for me to draw out my armhole line, you divide your bust circumference by 6 and add 1.5 inch. Mine is 9 inches after calculations. So I'm going to measure 9 inches down and I'll mark. And then this shoulder line that is 9 inches. So whatever yours is, you drop it down as well. So I'll mark 9 inches down. And then I'll connect my points. So after doing that, I'm going to draw a straight line down from the shoulder slant to this line. So this line now is my chest line and this is my armhole line. So I'm going to be creating my armhole curve from this line. So find out the midpoint of your armhole line is. So mine is 4.5 inches and I'll mark. So my bust circumference measurement is 11 inches. I'll add ease of 1/4 of an inch. And then I'm going to connect from here to the midpoint to meet my circumference measurement. And since here is straight, all I need to do is connect from here to my circumference measurement. So this is my armhole for the back. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to plot in my circumference measurement for my waist. So mine is 9.5 inches. So divide your circumference measurement by 4. So mine is 9.5 inches. So 9.5 puts me here. And I'm also going to be adding 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. That's for ease. So after doing that, I'm going to connect these 2 points from here to here. Like this. And then I'm going to be adding 1 inch sewing allowance. So 1 inch sewing allowance. I'll connect the points like this. So this is 1 inch sewing allowance, and I added 1/4 inch ease. I'm noting it there, so anytime I take this pattern, I know exactly what I did. So the next thing we need to do now is to cut out this pattern. I'm going to be adding all my sewing allowances when transferring to fabric. I've already added sewing allowance on the side, so I'm just leaving the side. To the hem and the shoulder, I'm going to be adding sewing allowances once I'm ready to cut out on fabric. So I'm just going to cut out this pattern now, and then I will label it. So I'm going to label this pattern so that I know what it is. So I'm just going to write back pattern wrap top, so that anytime I take this pattern, I know exactly what it's for. So after drafting the back, the next thing we're going to do now is we're going to use this back to draft the front. I've taken another pattern paper and I've placed the back on it, and then what I did is I drew a line all the way down here and I placed it on that line. So I'm going to trace out this pattern now exactly as it is onto this paper, and then I'm going to be creating the armhole for the front. So I'm just going to mark, that's my shoulder line. So these are all the points I need. So the first thing I'm going to do is measure whatever you have. Waist circumference measurement divided by 4. Mine is 9.5 inches. I added 1/4 inch. That's what I have here. And I added 1 inch sewing allowance. So all you need to do is just take the measurement of what you have for your back pattern on the waistline. So take what you have here, and I'm going to place it here exactly like this. Okay? And I'm just going to draw out the lines. So after doing that, so the next thing I'm going to do now is to draw out the neckline for my front. Remember, this is the width of the neckline for the back. So that's what I'm going to be using. And then to get the depth, I'm going to be going down by 7 inches. From the shoulder line, I'm going to be going down by 7 inches. So 7 inches will put me here. Okay, so I put a dot there. So I have 1 dot here. Then I have another dot here. And then at the bottom here, this is the center front. So this is center front. I'm going to go up by 2 inches. I'm going to be using a rope here. So this is where I'm going to be placing the rope. So 2 inches on here, so like this. Okay, so now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to connect from this top to this 7 inches that I'm going to go down the depth of my neckline, and I'm going to connect it to this part, this 2 inches. Okay, remove my neckline like that. So you can decide to use a curve or use a straight ruler. So I'll connect from here to here, from my neck width to the depth, and then from my depth all the way down here to where I want to add the rope at the top here. So like this. See? So after doing this, the next thing I need to do now is I'm just going to connect the shoulder and then draw out the armhole curve for the front. The front, I'm going to be going in by 1/2 inch. So this one I didn't go in, I left it like that. I'm making a dartless wrap top. So I'm going to take this out now. So I'll connect from here to here. And then I'll connect these points. So the next thing I need to do is I've drawn the shoulder line, and then I'm going to draw the armhole line all the way down here like this. I'm going to get the midpoint of this line, and then I'll connect it to the end. So the midpoint of my line is 4.5 inches because my armhole line is 9 inches. So I'm going to go in by 1/2 inch. I'm going to go in by 1/2 inch, and then I'm going to connect these 3 points together. So that's the armhole line. So this is my wrap top. So this one we're going to be cutting 2. Front pattern wrap top. So that's it. So I'm going to cut it out now and then use it to cut on fabric. So these are my pattern pieces for my wrap top. So the next thing I need to do now is to cut them out on fabric. So I have placed my fabric on fold and placed my pattern paper on it. And then I've added sewing allowances on here to the shoulders and then to the side. So I'm going to be using this sewing allowance to attach my belts, and here I'm going to be using it to attach my facing. I'm going to be using facing. If you want to use bias, you can go ahead and use bias. But you want to fold it, you can go ahead and do the same. But I'm going to be using facing to turn my top. So I'm going to cut out now. So I'm just going to separate it. This is my front piece, so I have two pieces. I will now cut out the back. The back is going to be on fold, so I'm going to be cutting out the center back. Center back is not going to be opened, it's going to be on fold. And then I'm going to go ahead and add my sewing allowances. I've placed the fabric on fold, and then I've added my sewing allowances. I've already added on here, so I did not add, and I've added to the bottom. So I'm going to cut out the back pattern now. So this is the back. I've cut it out. So these are both my front and back pattern pieces. So I'm going to take out my pins now. So this is my wrap. This is the front. So this is the back. So this is going to be on top like this. And then this is going to be like this. See? So these are a wrap. And then I'm going to be adding my rope here on this side, and I will use it to wrap the top to the back. So the next thing I'm going to do now is I'm going to cut out my rope. I'm going to make it 2 inches. By the time I finish folding, it's going to be 2 inches. I left 2 inches here. So I left half an inch here to sew the facing. I'm going to cut out the facing, and I'm also going to cut out the rope. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead now and cut out the facing for both my front and my back, and I'm also going to be cutting out the rope for my top. So after cutting out my facing and my belts, this is what I have. So these are my belts. So I use a matching fabric for the belts, and I folded it into 2. So right sides facing right sides. So I'm going to sew it, but before I sew it, let me show you the other pieces. So this is my back, and this is the facing for the back, which I'm going to be sewing in using half an inch sewing allowance. So these are my sleeves. So if you want to see how I drafted this sleeve, I'll put the link in the description box below and on the cards above. And then these are my facing for the front. So I cut out 2, 1 for each side. So this is my facing for this one, this is my facing for this one. So it's going to be right sides facing right sides. So before we sew in the facing, we're going to be putting the belt in like this, and then the facing is going to be on top, and then we're going to sew. So it's going to be together. So before I sew in the facing, I'm going to go sew in the belt. So this is our belt. So I folded them and ironed them. So the next thing we're going to do is I'm going to cut one side for us to have a slanted side. So this side I'm going to be slanting. So I'm going to measure 2 inches inwards, 2 inches inwards like this, and I'll mark. And then I'm going to slant it down like this to the edge. So I'm going to cut out that piece. This is a kind of design. So I'll cut it out. So the length of my belt is 44 inches. So you decide how long you want yours to be. So now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go sew using half an inch sewing allowance. I'm going to sew like this and then sew it closed. So after sewing my belts, this is what I have. You see, I sew the edges and I use pinking shears to give my fabric a neat finish. So just make sure they are equal. So I'm just going to trim this side. See, so these are my belts. So I'm going to turn them right side out, and then I'll give them a good press. To turn your belt inside out, there are different ways of doing this. So for today, I'm going to be using a safety pin. So I've already sealed here completely. So you can either open a bit of it so that when you put this through here, you have a space to bring this out. And then you can either hand stitch it or seal it later. Okay, so this is what you do. So I put my safety pin inside like this, and then I tuck the safety pin inside, and then I start gathering it. As I'm gathering it, trying to put this on the inside so that it can go inside. So I'm just going to be doing this till I get to the end. Like I said, I sealed here so I can open up a bit of it, so where I can pull out the safety pin. So just keep pulling. See, pull the gathers so that the part where you put the safety pin will go inside. Keep gathering and pulling. If you've sealed yours closed, you can open a bit of it where the safety pin can come out. Not too much, just a bit. See, my safety pin is out now. Just keep gathering. I'm trying to pull out my fabric now. See, it's coming out, and then you pull. See, so this is all done now. I can now give it a good press. So this is our rope turned right side out. I can now give this a good press, and then I'll stitch here closed. See, so this is how to turn your belt right side out. And then I'm going to place it on top of my front like this. And then the facing is going to be on top, and I'm going to use half an inch sewing allowance to sew the facing on here, and I'm going to serge the edges of the facing as well, okay, just to give it that neat finish. So the next thing I'm going to do now is I'm going to serge. I'm going to go serge the bottom. I'm going to serge the edges of my facing as well. So I'm just going to go do that now, and then I'll come back and show you what we're going to be doing next. So for my back facing, I also sew the facing to the main fabric, you see, and I serge the edges as well to give it a neat finish. So serge the edges, and then if you do not have a serger, you can use different types of finishing. You can use a zigzag if you have a domestic sewing machine that has a zigzag stitch, or you can use pinking shears. So these are pinking shears. They finish up edges really nice and stop fabrics from fraying. So after doing this, the next thing is I'm going to notch. Be careful not to cut into your stitches, and then I'm going to iron it down so that it can lay very flat. I'm going to turn the facing to the back side like this, and then I'll give it a good press so that it can stitch on the inside. And then when I'm ironing it, I'm going to be putting hemming gum on the inside so that it can stay down. So this is for my back. So this is what the back looks like. See, I've serged and ironed it down. So this is what we have. I'm still going to iron in hemming gum. So this is the back. These are the front pieces. I've also gone ahead and serged. So we have a neat finish for both of them. And these are our belts. We've turned them right side out and I've ironed them down. So the next thing we need to do now is to sew the facing for the front. So right side facing right sides. You see, so this is my facing. I'm going to sew using 1/2 inch sewing allowance all the way. And then before sewing that, I'm going to take one of the belts and then I'm going to place it here. So I'm sandwiching it in the middle like this. So I'm going to use my 1/2 inch sewing allowance. I'm going to sew all the way down to the bottom. So whatever sewing allowance you left is what you should use to sew. I left 1/2 inch sewing allowance, so that's what I'm going to be using. So I'm going to sew all the way 1/2 inch sewing allowance. I'll do the same thing for the second one as well. So I have pinned them down. These are my belts. See, so we'll go to the sewing machine now and sew using 1/2 inch sewing allowance all the way down for both of them. So I have sewn the facing and ironed it down using hemming glue. This is what I have. So the next thing we need to do now is to sew the shoulders for both the front and the back. So right sides facing right sides. So this is my back. So right sides, and then I'll place one part of the front on it and then the other one on it. Then I'm going to sew using 1/2 inch sewing allowance. After sewing the shoulders, this is what I have. See, this is the wrong side and then this is the right side. So this is our wrap top coming together. See, so the next thing I'm going to do now is I'm going to iron hemming gum here so it lays flat. Then after doing that, the next thing I'm going to do is to sew in the sleeves. And then for the sleeves, I've gone ahead and serged all the edges of my sleeves. You see, I've serged the edges here and here. I've serged here and here as well. So the next thing I'm going to do now is for the sleeves, I'm going to create 1/2 inch channel for both of them. I'm going to be adding elastic at the bottom. So I'm going to go sew the bottom. That is me creating a casing for the elastic. Okay, I'm just going to sew using 1/2 inch sewing allowance all the way down. So let's go to the sewing machine now and sew it down. So these are the sleeves. So I have done the casing for the elastic. See, I've sewn the casing for both sleeves. So this is my top. So I'm going to sew both sleeves to the top. See, like this. So the next thing I need to do now is to attach the sleeves to my top. So right sides facing right sides. So you take your notch where I notched, and then I'm just going to pin. So whatever sewing allowance you left, so use it to sew. So I'm going to pin it all the way, and then from here all the way I'll pin the two sleeves and then we'll go and sew them down. So after sewing in the sleeves, this is what I have. Sleeves all sewn in, and I have also serged to give it a neat finish. You see how the inside of my top is nicely finished? See how I have serged? Nicely finished. So the next thing we need to do now is to sew the sides. So whatever sewing allowance you left, use it to sew the sides. I left 1 inch, so I'm just going to use 1 inch to sew the sides. And once I finish sewing the sides, I will hem. I'm going to go do that now, and then I'll come back and show you what it looks like. I hope this tutorial was helpful. Thank you so much for watching. Please like and share. If you have not subscribed, please do so. I'll see you in my next tutorial. Take care and God bless.